So a big part of building software obviously is being good at problem solving. That's pretty much the whole thing. You're not always going to know what to do. And with AI being brought in, I feel like a big part that is missed is how to use the tools to not atrophy the muscles that you're trying to maintain or also trying to gain. You're trying to get better at certain things. And so these are some of the things that I'm using right now in my project to help me kind of debug and get through problems, because you'll actually get worse if you just constantly have these training wheels on. But there's obviously upside and there's certain ways of doing it. So I'm not scripting anything. This is me live working. And I wanted to just show you some of the stuff that I've learned from using these tools for a little over a year to help my workflow and learning as well. So by the end of the video, I can just kind of show you, we're going to be going through these topics. So, always read the code that it produces. That's kind of something I'm just going to harp on a lot, because if you're not doing that, you're not learning, and it will generate stuff that you don't even know what it means. So what's the point of that? The next one we'll cover is how to ask the right questions. So it's treating this as a pair programmer that's sitting next to you that is really like a Stack Overflow replacement or Google replacement, and less about the code gen. It's still doing the code gen, obviously, but you want to ask those questions. And then there's a trick with this thing called Repopack, and then using dictation and then adding comments. So always read the code it produces. Here's a case in point example where I've already gone through and we're building this Google Calendar meets health app called Map. That's what I work on full time. It's launching soon. And it has a lot to it. It's got an AI model. It's trained on your future self. But for the point of this, we are debugging some stuff around the performance of pulling in events and using context and all of that, and caching. And so I've run into this problem where I refactored things such that we have a couple different contexts. And the layout of the project is I have Supabase as the back end. I have all these mutations and queries in here that are broken into directories for the area of focus. Make this a little bigger. So all these are in here. These are the reusable kind of building blocks of contacting the database for reads and writes. And then we have a caching layer, which frankly I'm pretty new to in this pattern, but I learned it from a project called Midday. And what I've done is I have all the components. So on a calendar, you have a grid, you have the content for the grid that hydrates it, you have the header, you have a menu, which is the thing on the left, current time indicator, all these things that make up the calendar, and then the contexts. So actually reading the code is what we're going to talk about, where I'm debugging something and I try to do it without AI first, because otherwise I'm not going to get better at problem solving. And another thing is these things have a lot of downtime, like a lot of downtime. So if this thing's down and it's not working, you still want to know how to do it. And the more you know, the better you're going to be able to directing these. So I have an issue where I updated to have the calendar data context and a calendar UI context. And the reason I did that was because this will handle all the UI related states, such as the selected date, which are calendars visible, currently selected event. It's purely for managing user interface state. So that's the calendar UI one. And then calendar data context manages all the data related state, including fetching calendar events, yada, yada, yada. So that came out of asking a question, right? I asked it a bunch of questions after it generated the code, after I'd read the code. And so in here, now that I've made these contexts, I'm kind of going back and seeing that I have these problems, seeing that there's some data types that are incorrect. And what an LLM will do, if you just come in and you say, hey, look, like, here's some information about it. Like, this is what we're doing. Here's, some linting errors. Well, good news is that will be helpful most of the time, but some of the time it'll actually undo a change that it just made. So if I had this issue where the get cached events has the wrong types and I'm yapping at it, hey, go fix this thing, but it doesn't have context of what it needs to look like what's actual full picture issue, then it'll just go in isolation and fix the error within that one file without thinking about the rest of the project. Even if you do like the command enter way of it, like indexing the whole code base, a lot of time it misses it. So if I didn't actually read the stuff that's coming in, I wouldn't recognize that. I wouldn't know my code base like the back of my hand. And that's what you want. You want it so that anytime you come back in, you already know exactly what's going on. So again, just make sure you're actually reading this. And that way, when I go to fix the next issue, I'm going to know that it's maybe undoing the work that it just did. So that's really, really important, is just make sure you're like reading through everything. Otherwise, you can just kind of flip flop, and you can actually spend more time just yapping at this thing and sitting there and hoping that it'll work than if you just take in the time to read everything that it gives. And this brings me into the second thing, which is just asking a lot of questions. So the beauty of these are, there's no bad questions. Like, you can ask it as many questions as you want without feeling bad. And it's not going to make you, it's not going to ridicule you, right? It's going to just answer them. So some of the questions that I like to ask are in this file. Let me just pull it up. So coding prompts. I'll ask it, what are other ways that we could write this code? What are the pros and cons of this approach, or those approaches? That's a really good one. I have explained this code from the perspective of a blank programmer. So in my case, I always plop in, Next.js with app router, TypeScript, React, and then it'll break things down. So in the case where I was trying to get better at managing the state, it provided me with a bunch of different options. It says you're not actually going to need to manage it. You can use these contexts. And so then another one would be, are there ways of refactoring this code to be more modular, readable, and robust? This one is not something you want to just use lightly. So if you are going to use that, just beware that it's, this is like architectural. This is like saying, hey, you're using the constructor pattern before. How about this wrapper pattern? Or, hey, you were using classes. Let's try this. This could be better. And so you want to be careful with that one, but it is helpful if you feel like you have a lot of spaghetti code. The next one would then be, what are the common mistakes people make when writing code like this? So these kind of questions are really helpful. And then finally, like if you're trying to really drill home a concept, because that's what you're trying to do, you want to understand it well, is I like to ask, well, hey, if we make this decision on introducing this new pattern or updating the way that we're handling this particular part of the project, how would I explain what we're about to do to a friend on the phone who's also an engineer? And that's a really good trick, because then it will break it down in simple language, like it's talking to somebody on the phone, and you end up with something really helpful that if you make this decision, you want to, have some conviction behind it. And sometimes if it's going to add more work, you want to be able to like come back to that. So I found that helpful too, where we're about to do these contexts, and then it says, hey there, so we're working on optimizing our calendar, and it explains all the things. So if I ever want to really like drill home why we're about to do something, I'll typically ask that question, and it ends up being really helpful. Like I found myself coming back to it because I want to just make sure I drill home that concept. The next one is what I'm about to do, which is the Repopack. So I've seen people on Twitter talking about how you can, write these custom scripts that will allow you to take the whole repo and optimize it into a text file that's optimized for LLM readability. You don't have to do that. You don't have to like write anything custom. You just get this thing called Repopack, and it'll save you a whole bunch of time. And it's a powerful tool that packs your entire repo into a single AI-friendly file, perfect for when you need to feed your code base to LLMs. That's it, right? And so what I'll do is I install it, and then I run it. Try running Turbo, or let's just try running Repopack and see. I don't think I need the npx. Maybe that's it. Let's try running Repopack. Cool. So forget the script. I need to edit that. But I typed in Repopack, and all it did was ran through everything. Oh, it looks like I have an environment variable. I'm going to have to revoke that. But anyways, it took that. It said, hey, I went through 400 files. I went through all the characters in it. Here's how many tokens it is. So normally, I would exclude a lot of the stuff, right? And that would get it under like sub 200,000. If you're using Gemini, there's just 500,000 tokens. But then you could just take this output that's at the root and start doing some pretty interesting and helpful stuff with it. So I like doing this for new code bases. Like if I wanted to open up an open source project and understand how it works, like a good case for that was last night. It kind of helped me figure out this project, which there's a lot of storms in Florida right now, and there's lightning everywhere. And I was looking at this map, and I was like, how do they do this? Like, how do they figure out how all the lightning is, striking, and like it's not loading right now? Like, how do they get this data? And then I found out that there's these, it's this kind of open source community of people. And then I found a repo that lets you automate your house. So if there's lightning within 5 kilometers, it can do some interesting stuff. But point is I was able to then take this repo, which is written in Python, which I don't really know a whole lot about. Like, I can get around in it, but I would then go and I'd Repopack it, and then I would start asking it a lot of questions. And they have some pretty helpful ideas for things that you want to do. So you could just, you could pack a remote repo. You don't have to pull it. You can do it for code review and refactoring suggestions. So, hey, this has my entire code base, yada, yada, yada. You can generate docs with it. You can evaluate the code, the quality, adherence to best practices. Again, with these things, it's kind of like the needle in the haystack test, or like the smaller the amount, the better. So what I would do after this was, I would basically cut things, right? So if I wanted to run it again and pass it that flag, I would just do that, and then I would start working with that. But you get the idea. It has, like, in terms of the format, it will give you the structure of it, so you can see all the files, and then it actually explains it in here. Like, you have the files, the file names at the top, and you can also add custom instructions. I haven't used this one, but definitely check out the repo. It's, well maintained. 3 days ago was the last thing. It's got 885 stars, pretty helpful. And the last one I want to cover, and I've mentioned this in a previous video, but I always had this .ai directory, and in here I'll have prompts. So when it comes to SQL, I will have stuff in here, and it's specific to my project. So this is what we're trying to do. Here's our objective. You can even link in the docs for certain things. So if you want to do that, you could. And then add comments. This is one that I found really helpful because it just speeds up the output, and it makes it so that these LLMs don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about like what's going on in this file. And it's just a good thing for you, the dev, to be able to say like, hey, like, what's going on in this clear calendar action? Well, it clears the user's calendar both in Google Calendar and the local database. That's pretty cool. And then it explains, this will look a lot like a library, right? Or like if you had V3 calendar types from Google Calendar, this is what you'd be looking at. It would show you what the params are, what it returns, if it throws anything. And then it'll actually write out the steps. So I can put this in a gist in the video description. But those are the things that I found really helpful. Last one is dictation. I almost missed it. I used a paid tool for this for a while. It was called Super Whisper, but it's just kind of useless. Like, you don't need it. So what you can do is just use the built-in Apple one if you're on Apple. Sorry if you're not. But in here, I think it's, let's see, dictation. And I just have this set to command key twice. And I have the microphone source to this thing. And so when I jump in here, I'm not sure if it'll allow me to do this here because I have like other stuff going on. I don't want to throw off my, well, let's just try it. So if I do a command K and then I hit this twice, I could say what's going on in this file. And that's a pretty bad question, but you can see it's actively transcribing that, and it's really accurate. And so then I can just use voice to do a lot of like the prompting and explanations, which is quicker than typing. And so those are the things that I'm using. So I'm gonna actually go and do the work now, but wanted to just pause and ask you guys if there's any other things that you guys are using that I didn't mention, because I think this is where it's going, where the developers and the builders who know how to leverage these tools and have a deep understanding of how the technology works are the ones who can really, really just fly. And it's going to give you that kind of like generalist ability to touch a lot of different parts of the stack and learn so much quicker. If you like the video, make sure you like it. It's really helpful for me. It encourages me to continue making videos, and subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this, and I'll see you in the next one.